Hey everyone, welcome to our replay office hours. Just wanted to start by making sure that everyone can hear me. So if you can't hear me, let me know. Feel free to let us know in the chat. I am joined here today by Gerald from our engineering team. So, hey Gerald, if you want to say hi, if you can hear me. All right, and then so Gerald, if you can hear me, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Give me a sec. Let me test 1, 2. How do we know if it's working?
That's a good question. Yeah, I can hear you, but I can hear you on my computer. So if anybody can confirm on the chat if you can hear Gerald, that'd be super, super helpful. We'll give it a few minutes if you could just let us know.
My test 1, 2. Also, I just realized I'm not getting able to see your screen.
Gotcha. That's okay. We can see how it goes, right? So I'm not sure if we'll be able to confirm because it looks like I think you're the one, you're the viewer that we have, Gerald. So, okay. Okay. All right. Looks like we do have some people in the chat now. So I think it is working. I think it may just be a mixing issue. So yeah, I have it all the way up, but actually, let me try. Hold on. Try that. Yeah, that's okay. I think that we'll give it a shot again and see how that goes. If you want to hang out and stay on, feel free. But I'll go ahead and just leave it on. But we'll go ahead and get started. If you want to hop into the chat, maybe that'll be good too. Perfect. Okay, so thanks for joining, Gerald. I appreciate you trying. We'll get that figured out for next time. So cheers. All right, everyone. It is me. That was Gerald from our engineering team. He will be in the chat available to answer any questions. Appreciate you bearing with us on the technical issues today. We're getting things set up with Stream and Zoom and some configuration required to get that audio to mix appropriately. So, but yeah, so we'll go ahead and get started then with our replay office hours this week. We got a lot of kind of fun stuff going on today. Just to kind of recap, this is the second time that we're doing our replay office hours on Twitch as a stream. In the past, we had them as meetings, and now we wanted to be able to kind of broadcast these out, record them, and get some good questions going. So I am Cecilia Martinez. I am the community lead at Replay. So I spend my time working with our users, helping them, best leverage Replay for their developer support QA workflows, and kind of creating resources, documentation, and things like this, doing streams like this to kind of keep you up to date on all things Replay. So the agenda for today that we're going to be going through is we're going to start with talking about the changelog review. So what did we release this week? What are some new things that you can start to use right away in Replay? We're going to do some demos there. Then I spend some time talking about roadmap insights. So, what do we have coming down? Like, what are you going to be able to see coming soon with Replay? We'll take a look at some of the pull requests, the roadmap itself, and some of the kind of bigger features that we are planning so that you can give us your feedback and let us know if that's something that's useful for you, if and kind of what things that you'd like to see in Replay. If you do have any questions, that's something where you can definitely leverage this time. You can put them in the chat and we will get those answered for you or point you in the right direction if I don't have an answer for you. So definitely feel free to use this time to ask us any questions about Replay, debugging, in general, anything that you're working on or any feedback that you have for us. And then in the second half of the stream, I spent some time doing some live debugging. And so today we're actually going to be talking about through an example that was submitted to us by one of our users, where he used Replay to fix a TypeScript bug. So I'm going to walk through that, kind of show what that process was. And if we have some time, I also have a replay on hacking Wordle, which is kind of fun. So we'll see how that goes. Awesome. So just bear with me. I'm just going to go ahead and check the chat here, make sure we don't have any questions, and then just let me know if there's any audio, video issues as we go along. But we'll go ahead and get started with our changelog review. So let me go ahead and get this pulled up. Give me one moment. So obviously the big announcement this week in our changelog was first level Playwright support. So you've been able to record Playwright tests with Replay. I did do a small demo of that last week, just to show what kind of the first iteration of that was. But as of this week, we released first class Playwright support, meaning that you can now install Playwright, the Replay version with the Replay enabled browsers, record your existing tests. And we've also released a Github Action that will automatically upload failed tests to Replay. And so this is a really great workflow. We see this a lot. I actually previously used to work at Cypress, which is another automated testing framework like Playwright. And this is a workflow that we saw a lot of people leverage, which is using your CI, using something like a GitHub Action to whenever a commit is pushed or a pull request, kicking off those tests automatically, identifying the failures, and then uploading assets related to those failures. And in this case, the asset is a fully debuggable recording of the failed test. So we're going to take a look at that. I'm also going to show some layout changes and navigation shortcut changes that we did. So this is some improvements that we made to the UI within DevTools. We're really focusing on making these kind of iterative improvements to the developer experience in Replay. So happy to show you those two first as well. So let's go ahead and start with that. I'm going to go ahead and change now and share my screen. All right, so you should see a replay of a React calculator. This is one of my go-to examples that I use when showing Replay. It is from the React docs. This is an example calculator app. This is a replay specifically for a divide by zero error. I actually used this last week. I did a webinar with Women Who Code front end about how to debug your debugging process. And this is their example that I used. But pulled it up today to show you the new layout changes and also navigation shortcuts. So with Replay, as you probably noticed, when you're in this DevTools mode, you have a lot of windows. We give you a lot of information because we have a lot of information to give you. It's very customizable. You're able to, pretty much drag everything to resize it. The columns, you can show and hide columns. You can drag the sources menu. You can kind of increase this here. But we wanted to give you even more flexibility and options depending on how you're debugging and what kind of space that you need. So we have introduced two things. First is this toggle video mode. So this icon here, if you hover over it, it says hide video. And so if you don't need to look at the DOM while you're debugging, you can just click on that and it gets rid of the video. You can click on the icon again here to bring it back up. We used to have a menu where you had to click in and then select hide video or show video. So this is just a much faster and it's a lot easier to find so that if you can just toggle that video open and close while you're debugging. The other functionality that we've added is actually letting you choose a layout type. So this is the default layout that you're used to. You have your console with the elements, React, and network tabs here at the bottom. You have your video. To the left, you have your sources panel, which is where you're going to see all the files with your code in it while you're debugging. And then you have a column over on the left-hand side. We've added this icon here right above the console that you can click on, and you can choose a different layout type. So right now we're on dock to bottom right. That is the default layout. The other ones that you can choose are dock to left and dock to bottom. So dock to left, we'll go ahead and select that now, is useful when you need more vertical space. So for example, if I want to be able to see my DOM here, my video, and I'm also, for example, maybe looking at a really long source file. This is not a good example because it's a short one. Or for example, if I'm taking a look at elements and I want to be able to click in and see my entire DOM tree and expand all of this out, and I really want a lot of vertical space, this is a good use case for this dock to left mode. So as I'm hovering over my elements, I can see everything really nice and big on my video. And then I also have I have more room here to be able to scroll up and down. So that is the dock to left mode. Just give me 1 second, just checking the chat here. Awesome, okay. And then next is going to be dock to bottom. So if dock to left is when you need more vertical space, dock to bottom is when you need more horizontal space. And so I'm actually going to go over to a different replay. This is a replay of Excalidraw, and I have that set up here. So right now I'm in this dock to bottom mode. And this is helpful if you don't really care about having too much vertical space, but you want to keep maybe your video nice and big and be able to see that in great detail. So in this case, I have the React tab open. And again, the React Dev Tools in Replay allows you to see all of your components, all of your component state. And in this case, as I'm kind of hovering over, I want my video to be big because I want to be able to see all the individual icons that are and areas on the screen, all the different components that are triggering as I hover over these, because I'm looking for a specific one. Like I want to get into this component here. And so in this use case, I don't really necessarily need to see all of my components listed in a vertical space. I really care more about having this nice big video view. So again, depending on how you're debugging, depending on which tools that you're using, these are different views that you can leverage. Again, if you just like how it normally is, dock to bottom right is your default. And the one thing that I did want to mention is that when you are docked to the bottom, let me go ahead and pull that back up here. You'll see that your sources tab is now inside the console. So again, just to show the difference, when you're docked to bottom right, you have your sources panel here, which allows you to see all the files of your code, right? When you go into dock to left mode, the sources, it gets folded in to your console. So you still have your console, you still have your elements, your React, and your network tabs, but now your sources are also folded in, and it opens up a secondary row here with your different files. So that allows you to, kind of toggle between console and sources, but gives you more vertical space with the video. Same thing when you're docking to bottom. It's going to be folded in your sources tab here with a secondary row to view those. So, all right, so those are the layout changes. If you have any feedback on those, definitely let us know. We're always here for your comments and your suggestions. That's how we make Replay better. Next thing I wanted to show you is navigation shortcuts. So back in our example here, let's take a look at our app component, and we have a click handler. And so I have a click handler here that hits 9 times. As I hover over any line in my source, I can see how many hits that line has. And what that means is that's how many times that code executed during my replay. And so a new feature that we have is, you can click the plus button in order to open this print statements box, which will output to the console. It also allows you to toggle in between the instances. But now we have a navigation shortcut where if you aren't working with print statements and you're really just wanting to navigate to certain points in time, you can do that right from the source. So when you're hovering over the line, you'll see the normal plus sign button, the icon that you normally see. If you hit Command and you hold it down on your keyboard, the Command key, you'll see that it changes to an arrow. This allows you to move forward and jump to the next instance of that line hit. So we can see the DOM changing, we can see the console moving, and we can also see at the bottom in our timeline that we have this red dot that is also jumping as we move through. You can also move backwards, so Command Shift, and it alters into a back arrow, and you're able to navigate to the previous instance. So again, we can see our DOM updating, we can see the console changing, and we can see the timeline on the bottom, our dot jumping around to the different instances. So when you have, for example, you want to just, like if you're evaluating parameters of a function and you want to evaluate them as they are and then jump to the next one and evaluate them again, and you aren't leveraging print statements, maybe because there's a lot of instances, maybe you have a lot of hits, then this is something where you can really quickly navigate between previous and future hits. It also shows how the time travel aspect of replay works, right? So replay is capturing everything during the recording, and you're able to jump to all these different points in time. So that is navigation shortcuts. Again, it's Command to move forward, Command Shift to move back. We have added that to our documentation. So if you have any questions on that, we do have a number of keyboard shortcuts in general. This is something that we've added to our docs. So if you have any questions, you can check out our documentation for all the available keyboard shortcuts. Great, so let me just go ahead and do a quick check on the chat, and then we'll go ahead and move on. Awesome. Okay, so those were the changes that we did to our UI. Next, I want to dig into these Playwright changes because they're really exciting and we're really happy to share these with you. Okay, so as I mentioned, we have two changes that occurred. The first is that we have first-class support for Playwright. This includes the creation of a Github Action that lets you automatically record your test with Playwright and then upload failed recordings. So we have updated our documentation. So in our docs, in the guide section, we have a recording automated tests section. And within that, we have our recording Playwright. And this is where the documentation is for the GitHub Action. You can also, visit the GitHub Action directly. That is here in our GitHub Replay IO Action Playwright. All of this is also linked from the docs. But this essentially is the GitHub action that walks through the process. Anytime a pull request is initiated, it's going to run on Firefox by default, but that can be updated. And it also will comment back to the PR with a link to the failing tests. So, you can just start using this action in your own workflow. If you want to see it, an example of it, we also have been recording the Floating UI, which is a open source library that has a really great Playwright test suite. So we just kind of leverage that as an example. And this is an example of a pull request. And this was used to GitHub Action. So, if we go to our Actions tab here, we can see all the workflows that ran. So if you want to come in here and see what the logs look like, get an example, this is a good example for that. But if we go back, we can see the pull request here actually has a comment from the GitHub Actions bot with the failed test. So it has the name of the failed test. And if we click on it, we can actually open up the replay itself. So this is an example of what it looks like when you record a test with Replay. Now, again, if you're used to using Replay for bug reports or in your development workflow to record a bug using the Replay browser, this is the same process, except the machine does it for you. So in CI, you're using the Replay-enabled browser. The Playwright test code is running and executing. When we identify a failure, we automatically upload the replay for you. So here, if I play, and I'll go ahead and replay that since it was pretty quick, as most tests are. If you are familiar with automated tests, they're pretty quick. We can see here that we have the recording, but even more importantly, we have our developer tools, right? So we can inspect everything that happened during this test and why it failed. So we can take a look at our source code. We can see how often certain lines executed. So if we know where in what part of the code base, we can search for that. We can see if something hit. We also can inspect our elements. So if in this case, the arrow is supposed to be a certain direction, we can come in here, we can see our elements, we can view all of our class information. All of that is available to you in the replay. And again, this is all automatic, happened right from the GitHub action. So we are really looking for projects who want to incorporate this into their existing Playwright test suite. You don't have to add anything to your tests. You don't have to change anything. It's a very simple configuration where all you're doing is essentially updating to use the Playwright browser instead of the default browser that comes with Playwright. So if you're using the GitHub Action, that'll all take care of it for you. It installs the needed packages on the machine, it kicks things off, it does the upload. All you have to do is set the environment variable for your API key for replay, and all of that is outlined in the docs here. So yeah, if you use it, let us know how it goes. We do have a testing channel in our Discord. So replay.io/Discord, you can join us there. All of our team works in Discord, so you can chat with us. We love talking to our users, getting that feedback. So the testing channel is where we're going to be talking about all the updates and progress that we make with Playwright. If you use a different test runner, don't be alarmed. We are also working on we have one for Puppeteer. We're working on a fork for Cypress, which is basically at the proof of concept level. And then we also have had users use it with Selenium. So let us know if you're interested in a different test runner as well, or if you want to help us test these things out, test out the tests, so to speak, because we'd love your feedback. So that is the Playwright GitHub action. The one other thing that I do want to mention that was new this week is the Replay CLI. So the Replay CLI, when I did my example last week, if you were watching, when I recorded a Playwright test and I uploaded it manually, not using the GitHub action, I used the Replay CLI in order to upload that test and upload the recorded test. And we made some improvements to the Replay CLI so that now it can be used as an NPX package. You don't need to install it globally. And also it now includes the GitHub action and then also the Playwright dependencies. So we're really looking to improve the developer experience to where that you don't need to manage multiple dependencies, where everything is all together in one CLI. It also has improved the naming convention. It used to be replay recordings or recordings replay. I always get it confused, but now it's just replay. So I'll go ahead and show you that. We'll go ahead and pull up my VS Code here. I'll go ahead and clear my console. So this is the same example that I used last week. This is essentially a Playwright test that just adds some items to a to-do list. It comes from the Playwright docs itself. And then I have my Playwright config set up to where I'm using the Replay browser instead. So again, if you're running and recording tests manually, you'll need to set this up. If you're using the GitHub action, that takes care of that for you. But so, I go ahead and run my test. And I'm going to go ahead and just run the one test, and it's using Firefox. And we should see that pass in just a moment. And again, in CI, this is all happening automatically. And in this case, the test is going to pass. And so normally I wouldn't have it uploaded, but because I want to show you what the new CLI command looks like, I'm going to go ahead and do that. So we can just use npx at replay.io/replay. So that's the only command that you need now. You don't need to install the Replay CLI. Like I said, you don't need to install it on your machine. And it's just replay.io/replay. Before you had to use kind of different syntax and different commands. So we can do that ls command in order to see the most recent recording. I'll go ahead and grab that ID. And I'll go ahead and do npx again, replay.io/replay. Nice and easy, upload, and I'll pass the ID. That's going to go ahead and upload the recording that I just made of this test and add it to my library. So I'll be able to view it online. And so upload finished, view your replay, and we go ahead and have the link here, which I will click on. And we'll be able to see our replay here. So this is the test that I just recorded. And again, it's a much better developer experience. You have a much easier syntax to use. So let us know. We're going to be continuing to make improvements to the Replay CLI to just add packages in. So you have a single tool that you can use for anything related to replay. So, all right. Great. So that is the Replay CLI. Again, it's just replay.io/Replay CLI. There is an example. We have a create React app in TypeScript example with a single test that you can execute and then upload your replay. So if you want to check that out, and if you have any questions or run into any issues, let us know. Again, it's going to be in the testing channel. Oh, awesome. First time chat from a viewer. Thank you. Love replay. Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for watching our office hours. So yeah, so that was our change log. I hopefully you saw something interesting and that you can start to use. We want things to be as helpful for you as possible. So let's take a look at what's going. Let's take a look forward now and take a look at what's coming in our roadmap. So we do have a public roadmap in our docs. I'd like to just point that out in case you haven't seen it. It's in our contact us page here, the same place where you can find out about the Twitch office hours. We also do have a public roadmap on Airtable. So those are all connected to GitHub issues, so you can see what we're working on. One thing that I did want to call out specifically is a pull request that we have open. So it was just merged actually. So this is no longer a roadmap, but now a changelog post. But move pretty quick here. So I'll go ahead and talk about it though. Is we're updating the command palette with new features. So we talked a lot about how we did the UI changes in order to improve the developer experience. This is another example of those types of iterative improvements that we're making. So you'll be able to toggle video, change your layout, enable focus mode, and then also toggle light theme and dark theme directly from the command palette. So if you're not sure what the command palette is, it's this. So this is our command palette. You can open it with Command K as a keyboard shortcut, and it just gives you it's a quick launch to a lot of different use cases and functionality. So we can see here that it was merged. So now it's, like I said, we can see it live. So we can go ahead and you can toggle video. You can pin the toolbox to the bottom, to the left, to the bottom right. We can toggle dark mode. Nice. So previously for dark mode, you had to go into your settings to change it. So now you can toggle it directly here from the command palette. Pretty exciting stuff. You can also edit focus mode here. So great. Yeah, so that just launched. That was something on our roadmap. We got it pushed out this week for you. So make sure you check that out. I'm going to leave dark mode off just because my eyes like the light better. And then the other thing that I wanted to talk about on the roadmap is something called live code analysis. So that's what we're calling it so far. I don't know if that's the name will stick. Some opinions on the team of the different ways. Yeah, so this is something actually where, all right, so just to kind of break this down. In our React calculator example, I just showed that you can see how many times a line of code was hit when you hover over it, right? So I can see that this code executed 9 times. I can also see that other things, maybe didn't execute. So in our Excalibur, if I pull up a source here, I can see like this had 95 hits. Something may have 0 hits. So one of the things that we're talking about is when you open a source, being able to see or understand very quickly whether what parts of your code were executed and what parts were not. So instead of coming in, hovering on a line, getting that context after the fact, us being able to demonstrate dead code versus live code. And that's where the name live code analysis comes from. It's not something that's happening live, like this Twitch stream, for example, is live. It's essentially live as in alive, or live versus dead, as in code that did execute during the replay versus code that did not execute. So this is actually really what would come in handy in the next example that we're going to take a look at, the TypeScript bug, because in that situation, we were able to debug it because we could see that certain lines of code that were supposed to execute did not. Same thing here in our React calculator example. This is a divide by 0 error, and there are 2 lines here, alert divide by 0 error and return 0, that are supposed to hit whenever you divide by 0, but they have 0 hits. So that's how we know that there's a bug, and we're able to zero in there. But imagine if you could essentially open up a source file and then get a really clear picture right away of what lines of code did not run. Maybe they're grayed out or they're collapsed or whatever it may be. We're still talking through all that. And then being able to see which lines of code did execute, and then narrow in and see how many times executed. So We do have a pull request open that's kind of doing some of the prep work for that to get prepared to in order to be able to provide more of that information. We already calculate all the hit counts and lines of code anyway, so it's a matter of how we best display that information to you. So if that's something that sounds exciting to you, something that you think that you could leverage, definitely give us your feedback on what your workflow might look like, what you would kind of like, how you would like to see that type of information in our Discord. You know, we have the development channel. We also have our general channel, both really great places to get feedback on features like that. So, all right. So that is our changelog and our roadmap. We spent quite a bit of time on that. So I appreciate you bearing with me. We're going to get into some debugging soon, I promise. But I just want to make sure there's not any questions from the chat. I'm going to just check that really quick here. Just give me one moment. Toggling screens. Awesome. All right, great. So as I mentioned, the debugging example that I want to work on this week is something where I'm actually going to be showing you a bug that was already fixed. So instead of doing a live debugging of a new bug, I want to walk you through an example. So this is an example that we wrote about this week on our blog. I can go ahead and pop that link in the chat here. Okay, so this is a post about debugging a bug in TypeScript itself using Replay. And the thing that's interesting about this is that it's actually debugging a bug with TypeScript itself, which means that it's not happening in the browser, right? So when you encounter a bug with something that's happening in like compile time or like in a runtime that's not a browser, you can still use Replay because Replay does have a recorder for Node. And that is what was used in this example. So the bug was reported, was fixed by one of our Replay users who is at Stately and Andorist on Twitter, or if you're in our Discord, that's also his name there, but it's Matoush, and was very, very kind in order to walk me through his debugging process for this and share the replays that he used in order to solve this bug. And so, yeah, I'd like to kind of walk through those with you now as well. So if you get a chance, check out the blog post. It goes into a lot of detail, but I'm also going to walk through those now here for you. So I'm going to start off by just talking about what the bug is. And it can be a little bit, we're a little bit in the weeds. We're in TypeScript, right? So, but this is the GitHub issue. And essentially, this has to do with the concept of a discriminate union type. And if I say anything, if I'm inaccurate with any of my terminology, please let me know in the chat because again, we're kind of in the guts of TypeScript here. But a union type essentially is a combination. So you can say this function will accept either a number or a string. And that's the example that we're going to be working with today. This union type becomes a discriminated union when you say that there is a certain parameter or property on that type that lets you tell what type it is. So we can say if it's type number or type string, then let's do certain things with it. So this is a kind of a new, from what I understand, a newer feature that was added to TypeScript recently that allows you to use control flow analysis to say, if this parameter is of a certain type, then do this. If this parameter is a certain type, then do that. But then to destructure and assign a certain type based on that parameter. So basically, if this type is num, then make it a number, not a number or a string. If this type is string, then make it a string and not a number or a string. So again, I think probably helps if we look at some code. So we have a method here that takes in arguments. It could be a kind A, which is a number, or kind B, which is a string. And normally what's supposed to happen is it says if kind equals A, then it'll destructure, it'll narrow that type to a number. And then you can use number specific functions like to fixed or math type functions on that parameter. If it's of kind B, then it will say, okay, now it's supposed to be a string, and it'll narrow that type to string instead of number or string. And then you can use things like to uppercase or concat and things like that, like string type methods. What's happening is that it works in most cases. So it works for function expression syntax. It works with arrow syntax. And then it also works when you have the manual destructuring. But when declaring as a method syntax, so when you're declaring your function using method syntax, then this behavior does not happen. It breaks down. So that is what this bug is, control flow analysis for dependent parameters. It doesn't work for methods. Bit of a mouthful, so that's why I wanted to break it down for you. So Matush encountered this bug and was kind of talking to some of the people in the bug report and some of the comments, and decided to take a stab at it using Replay. So what he did is he actually wrote a quick test that essentially has the method syntax. It declares it, and then it tries to use test if it's like a number or if it's a string of the type. And he recorded a replay to debug. And he recorded a replay using the replay node. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. Let me go ahead and get this pulled up. All right. So probably looks a little bit different if you are used to the replay browser. You'll notice that there's some tabs that are missing, right? We don't have the elements tab. We don't have a video because there's no DOM to record. This is a recording of just the node execution. So when you run replay node, it's a CLI. Essentially, you just run it, you install it, you run it, and then it records an execution of the program. So in this case, the program that was executed was just a simple test. I'll show you what that code looks like here. Give me one moment. Okay. So the test code itself is essentially just a declaration of the method, and then it says if type equals number, you should be able to call that on the number, or if type equals, otherwise it should be a string, but it's getting an error using the replay node CLI. And what the result is this replay. And again, we can see the console, and we can see network, because you could feasibly still make network requests from a node environment. But then everything else is going to be the same. You still have your breakpoints, you still have your print statements, you still have your call stack, you still have the ability to open sources and add comments. And what we essentially found out, so we'll go ahead and start here. So this is the get discriminate property access, and this is a function that Matush was able to narrow in on because he looked at the original when this feature was added, and this was related to that kind of narrowing process. We'll be able to see narrow type by discriminate. All of this has to do with taking that discriminate union and breaking it out depending on the type of the parameter. And so what we're doing here is we're kind of locked at this point in time, the fourth execution, and where I'm outputting the computed type, and I'm using a method called debug type to string. I can do that here in my console too. I can say computed type debug type to string. Oh, sorry. I think I had a little syntax issue there. So I'm gonna go ahead and just save that there. Okay, and that's loading up here. Okay, so there it is. So I can see that my type is still one or the other, right? So it's going to be string or number. This should have essentially narrowed it down to either number or string. So from there, we kind of traced in to see what was happening. And the nice thing is that we also have a working version of this. So because we know what it's supposed to do, we also have a replay of the working behavior. So I'll get that pulled up as well. So in this case, he used the arrow function syntax in order to see what it looks like when it's working. So if we go to the same line, let's get discriminate property access, and we have our computed type debug type to string, we'll be able to see once this kind of pulls up that again in this replay it's still string or number, and here it's outputting just number. So it's working here, it's not working here. Now we're able to kind of dig in and see why. So we can see here in the non-working version, these lines hit 0 times. In the working version, we're able to see that those lines do hit. They have a hit. So for some reason, in the working version, we're getting the information that we need and it's proceeding. In the non-working version, we have those 0 hits. So we then kind of lock in and we go inside this function here, the get candidate discriminant property. And I can just kind of click on it once I'm logged in, and it will take me directly to that. You can also use the step in and step out buttons here, but I kind of just like to hover over and click right into it. And so here we can see again in the broken version that we have some lines that aren't hitting, that in the fixed version, and I'm going to go ahead again and just click into this function. Oops, let me just log in. This get candidate discriminant property. Yeah, so we have here that these lines are hitting. And so it all comes down to this one line, which is basically we're checking if our reference is a binding pattern, a function expression, or an arrow function. So the binding pattern refers to that kind of manual destructuring, function expression, and then arrow function. And guess what a method syntax is? None of those three things. So that's why it works for all the other instances, but does not work for the method syntax. And so because we were able to see what lines executed, because we were also able to evaluate, so we in the console, we're outputting that it is coming back as false for that check. We're able to see that those lines did not execute. So yeah, so it's pretty interesting from there. Matush was able to apply a fix. He also added an is object literal method function check to that logical statement. So that was merged in, bug is now fixed, all using Replay Node. So again, if you have a bug that is not happening in your browser that you think you could really make use of Replay's features like the time travel debugging, being able to retroactively add print statements, being able to evaluate variables at different points in time, then you can leverage Replay Node for that as well. So great. Any questions on that? Definitely let us know if that's interesting to you. We also would love if people have their own examples like this. So Matush has been really great part of the community, gives us a lot of good feedback about Replay. But we love to see real world examples like this. We'd love to kind of get a sense of how you're debugging, how you're using Replay, what works for you, what doesn't work for you. Definitely let us know if you are able to share any replays with us. I would love to add that to our examples, our blogs. You know, I'd like to do debugging in public. That's why I'm doing these streams. And I think that it helps a lot of other people to see those types of examples. So if you have them, please share them with us so we can share them with the community. All right, so last but not least, we have a few minutes left here. So let's take a look at something fun. Let me just get this pulled up here. Okay, so this was recorded about a week ago. Jason Lester from Replay recorded this replay of Wordle. So I don't know who else has played Wordle. I definitely did. Was pretty addicted to it there for a minute. I think like all of us were. My Twitter, my Twitter feed probably got pretty annoying with all of those green and yellow squares. But the fun thing about Wordle, which a lot of people have kind of tapped into or realized, is that it's very driven by the browser and local storage. So when you record Wordle with something like Replay, you're able to capture a lot of information about how Wordle works. That's kind of fun to say. So I've seen a couple of fun kind of debugging things happening here. With Wordle, I've seen people use like automated tests in order to try different things to see to try and solve the problems. I've seen people tap into the local storage to get the answers and kind of like treat it that way. So this is a replay that Jason recorded, and then kind of where he just started diving into the code and pointing out some fun things in our code. So we'll take a look at some of these examples here. I also want to just kind of note that this is where the power of like comments comes in with Replay, right? So this is something where I did not record this replay. I have never hacked on Wordle before personally, but because Jason added some really strategic comments along the way with his thought process, I'm able to follow what he was doing and kind of see the same things. Every comment in Replay is tied, to two factors. One is a moment in time, and the other is either a spot on the video or a line of code. So all of these comments are tied to lines of code. So when I click on the first comment, for example, and I'm going to go ahead and just kind of make this bigger here, I can see that it takes me directly to this line in our source file. And it says, this is where we get today's word. So I don't want to spoil things too much. So I'm going to do a print statement. And I'm only going to print the first. So it looks like our array is MA. And again, this is bundled code. So it's minified code, which means it looks different from what the source code would look like. We're still able to work with it. It's still valid code. And we can see that MA is actually the array that stores all of the words in Wordle. I don't want to spoil it. This is recorded about a week ago, so chances are like this word's already old. So I won't print out the entire array. You know, you can if you want to proceed at your own risk with with this replay. But I can see ma.length, for example. I can start there. So I can output ma.length, which is going to show the length of our array, which is 2309. So that's a big array of words. Definitely don't want to look at all of them. I want to be able to keep playing Wordle myself. So let's go ahead and just see what the first word is. So I'm going to do MA, and then I'm going to do the index of 0. I'm going to hit save, and I can see that cigar is the next word, or was the next word as of about a week ago. So yeah, so if you wanted to come in here and get some clues as to what some of the words are, if you're just kind of curious what types of words get picked, that's something for me that I was always kind of interested in, is how that works. That's something that you can check out there on that line. And so the next section is a key down handler. And let's go ahead and actually just watch this replay really quick first. So I'm going to go back to the beginning. I'm going to hit play. And we can see that there's a modal gets dismissed. You can see that there is some keys that get inputted, repay, and you can also see what the result comes back as. All right, so I wanted to get that context there. So if we go back to our dev tools, and we can see that the next comment there is the key down handler. And we can say s equals a.key. Again, minified code, we can still play with it. And if we do a.key, we can output the value of the key for each instance. And we can even like rewind, right? So I can go to the R. I can see the next one here that I can go to the E and fast forward, and I can see the DOM changing each time, and I can see it jumping forward in time on the replay itself too. And then this is submit guess. So submit guess is the function here. It's where we decide if we want to evaluate the row. And this .evaluate row is the function. What it's essentially doing is it's checking game status. So we can kind of like, again, link into this point in time. Whenever you link into a point in time, you can hover over variables in replay to see what they are currently evaluated to. So we can see that game status is currently in progress, and can input is true. So it says that if game status is equal to in progress and then can input is true, which it is, then we can proceed. And then we can see if 5 does not equal the tile index, which it does, we can hover over into the tile index equals 5. Then we're going to return the board. Otherwise, we're going to continue. We're going to do the query selector. So we went ahead and skipped these lines, and then we can go ahead and get one hit for this evaluate row. So pretty cool. We are able to kind of hover over and see that logic and see why it returned. And then so we pass the solution in here, this dot solution, and again, we can lock in on that point in time. We can either hover over solution, or we can also output to the console. And then this is the compute for each cell of whether it is correct, absent, or present. This is where we get our yellows, greens, and grays, if you've played Wordle and what you just saw in the video. So this is the function here that does that. It's essentially filling each part of the array. So we have array, which is length of 5, and it's going through each one, and it's checking, and it's filling in with the colors. So pretty cool. And it saved the first guess here. And we're able to kind of just, track that as we go along using the replay itself. So that is Wordle. I'm going to go ahead, again, this is public, it's in our examples, but I'll go ahead and also pop it in the chat if you want to play around with that replay. Feel free to add any comments too, like as you find things. add a comment so everybody who kind of comes behind you can see things that you've discovered as well. So great. So we have about 5 minutes left. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to pop those in the chat. We are going to be next week. Gerald is going to be hosting next week, which is why I wanted to introduce you to him this week. So I'm sorry that we didn't get a chance to do that, but I will be out next week. So Gerald will be hopping in and he will be taking over hosting duties, which is really exciting. But yeah, if you have any questions for us in advance, always feel free to hit us up in the Discord, replay.io/Discord. If you have any replays that you'd like us to debug live, you can always submit those to us as well. Or if you have any success stories that you want to share that we can use for our examples, they're really helpful for our users. So awesome. Great. Well, I'll give it a couple minutes to see if any other questions come through in the chat. Otherwise, thank you so much for tuning in this week. Really, really, really excited about the GitHub Action. I think that's going to be a game changer. Like I mentioned before, I previously worked at Cypress. I advised a lot of companies on their testing strategy, and getting those automated results with something that you can actually debug is something that will really make a lot of developers, QAs, product, even all those different teams like have a much better experience, and also your end users. Less bugs means a better experience for your end users. So awesome, great. Well, I will go ahead and end the stream here since I don't see any other questions. But again, thank you everyone for tuning in. Thank you for your patience with the technical issues at the beginning of the stream. And I look forward to seeing you in Discord and seeing you in a couple weeks when I'm back here on Twitch. So cheers, everyone.